I love to read a book and be absorbed in words to escape the light.
Hello everybody, so I'm quickly going to do the readers tag that's going around BookTube at the moment. I will link the creator in the doodly-doo in my pants. Let's go. Question number 1. Would you rather only know the beginning of a series or book or only the end? I think ultimately if I had to choose between the two, I'd actually rather know the beginning. I think that, introductions to characters and such are often what makes a book quite exciting and interesting, and if I had to have that as opposed to just a really epic climax or something without any of the lead up to that, the build up to it, and without really knowing the characters and things, it just wouldn't have any of the same meaning or impact, and I wouldn't find it exciting. It would just be confusing. So if I had to choose, I'd much rather have only the introductions to books. Question number 2. Would you rather only read books from one author for the rest of your life, or only one book from a myriad of authors for the rest of your life? Certainly one book from a variety of authors, at least then there's variances, there's some different things to get to pick from. There's a wider selection and it doesn't limit you. Not that I'm saying that every author has to only have one distinct style and that limits the scope of their writing or anything, but at the risk of maybe that being the case, I think I'd rather just have one book from a lot of authors, then at least you have some variety in what you get to choose and whatnot. It broadens your options. Question number 3. What book have you reread the most? I think probably maybe the first 3 Anne of Green Gables books, certainly. So Anne of Green Gables, Anne of Avonlea and Anne of the Island. The first 3, I've certainly reread those a fair bit. I think I've reread the very first Little Women novel. I've reread that one quite a few times. Harry books, if we're going to count audiobooks as being a means of rereading, then certainly Philosopher's Stone, because I've read the book itself maybe 3 times, but I've listened to the audio CD an awful lot with Stephen Fry narrating, so I think probably I've racked up an awful lot of rereads with that one just by means of listening, so that probably counts too. Question number 4. Would you rather live in a faction or a district? Ideally neither. I don't think either of them end up being that great. I'm not for segregation. I don't think it's the very wise way of getting anything positive out of a situation. I think history has proven that that's probably the worst thing you could do, hence why dystopians are dystopic, because it was a stupid way of structuring your society. I guess a district maybe isn't too bad, so long as you get on with your other districts, I suppose. Ideally neither. This is why I have problems with Divergent, people. Well, it's one of the reasons I have problems with Divergent. Districts, I guess. So long as everyone was getting along. Question number 5. If you could live in any book, what world would it be? I know a lot of people would probably say Harry, because everyone wants to go to Hogwarts and be able to practice magic, but I think there's still every bit as many issues inherent in Harry's world as there is in ours, and that's kind of how it's meant to be. Fantasy is sort of a mirror to life with a lot of metaphors and such going on, and that's the point of it. I don't know if I'd want to live in Harry's world necessarily. You have to remember the Wizarding World has all of the same issues we have here, and added ones. They've extended upon racism with all their bigotry and such in terms of wizarding classes, so they've kind of taken what is already in a normal society, if you will, and made it worse, because the inclusion of magic has kind of amped up everyone's prejudices. So yeah, you need to bear that in mind, people. I think if I'm going to be really boring and give what I amount to a somewhat sensible answer to this question, I might actually want to live in the world that is Earth in Deborah Harkness's A Discovery of Witches, simply because it is everyday life. It's just that witches and wizards and vampires and demons exist without impinging too much on our day-to-day activities as human beings. I try to place myself into a fictional world in which there isn't too much trouble, because I don't want to get bogged down in other people's shit. Flash forward, but if I'm going to be a little bit more adventurous, I think it would actually be interesting to live in the world of the Kingdom of Cello, which takes up half of the narrative of Jacqueline Moriarty's A Corner of White. And the Kingdom of Cello is just interesting because depending on where you live in Cello, you could be essentially in any time period, any age of technological and medical and scientific advancement. The fact that they have their colours which act like weather would be interesting again. Also a bit dangerous, which, feeds in a little bit to my hesitation with wanting to spend too long in Cello, but I think that certainly to visit it, it would be very, very interesting, and I would like to check out the entire kingdom, maybe join the princesses on their royal tour, because that would be a good way to explore it. After answering that question, I remembered this book and thought, wait a minute, I wouldn't mind visiting Cello. So yeah, Kingdom of Cello in a corner of white. Question number 6. Would you rather be invisible or have the ability to fly, and why? Whenever I think of flying, especially when I dream about flying, I am always swimming through the air, like I have to swim. So it always seems to be a really strenuous effort on my part. It never seems like an actual enjoyable activity, like you have to work to fly in my head, which is a right shame. So I'd probably like to be invisible. I don't know whether or not I would use it to listen to other people's conversations necessarily, because I would feel too much like I was being a really prying, snoopy, nosy person. Via my ability to be invisible, I would like to be able to sneak into situations I wouldn't normally be privy to, and I wouldn't count that as spying. I'd like to just be in the atmosphere of something really cool, so I'd like to be able to sneak onto a film set and not get in anyone's way or bother anybody, but just be in that atmosphere and no one would have to know, and I'd just be able to take those memories away with me. So I think I'd like to just be able to insert myself into situations that I'd really love to experience without the hassle of having to actually get there. Question number 7. If you could date a paranormal person, who or what would it be? I'm trying to choose the most sensible of the options. Maybe a witch or wizard would be the best option because they are pretty much just human beings who happen to have some supernatural abilities, and often they're either born into it or they discover it, or it's something that they've worked at. For example, I very much like the notion of human beings who work at gaining magic, and so it's not necessarily like a passed down heritage sort of thing, but it's something that they've acquired through hard work, and I think that kind of brings it down to a more human level, and I wouldn't feel nearly as intimidated or threatened by that. And question number 8, this is just a fun one you can answer if you want. As a job, would you rather fill in the Santa or the Easter Bunny? And definitely the Easter Bunny. Santa's job would come with too much pressure, y'all. That's 24 hours of working your ass off. And yes, I know he seemingly has every other day in the year off and to chill, but I'm sure he's not doing that. I'm sure he's working tirelessly to get his factory full of his toys and all that kind of thing. Also, you're living in the North Pole, so like the weather is terrible, and you have to deal with the demands of an awful lot of children, and the build-up to Christmas is so much. I think the pressure is far too intense. Props to Santa, but I don't know if I'd be able to handle it. Also, I don't think I'd be able to rock this suit in the way that Santa can. Still pressure associated with being the Easter Bunny, but he has a little bit more fun. You get to, of course, just hang out with an awful lot of chocolate, so that's pretty cool. And you just get hopping around. I think it's a much more joyous task, actually, and just much more stress-free. That was the reader's tag, and that was fun and quick and enjoyable, and I hope my answers made sense. And if you've not done this tag, please feel free to do so, and I'll see you all later. Farewell.